Okay, well, hello everybody. We're here with Charlie today with Charlie Bee Company, and we're thrilled to have Charlie. I've got to say, I am so excited to do this interview. Charlie is somebody that has been at the top of our list for interviews. We've wanted to talk to him for a long time. A lot of you probably know Charlie from his TV show, which we'll certainly get into. But Charlie he's a bee removal expert. He's the director of the Texas Beekeepers Association. He's a honey and bee salesman. He's a reality TV star, and we haven't even gotten into his real career. So he's a super talented guy, a lot of fun. I'm honored to know him and interview him today. So first of all, before we get into some kind of nuts and bolts about bee removals and your sideline business and quickly becoming, I'm sure, a full-time business, before we get into all of that, I want to just first talk about your show for a minute. And I got to say, I watched it. I've seen your show. For those of you that haven't seen it, it's on Amazon Prime. I laughed through the entire thing. I mean, I just
Good,
doubled over. It was the best show I've seen in a long time. Uh,
good.
it's won several awards, best reality show on Catalyst content, and it's coming to PBS in Austin this fall, right?
That's right. That's right.
So tell us a little bit about how you got into beekeeping, how on earth you got into a reality TV show,
Yeah.
and maybe what's to come.
Well, the show is coming out. We're too pumped. We're like in production right now. We're doing things like cut-ins and last-minute things, but we really have most of our content, and it's been an odyssey. Be with COVID-19, kind of practicing social distancing and working with the crew and working with customers. Um, the show has been an absolute gift. As a bee removal guy, we're kind of an exhibitionist to begin with. So like, I kind
So
of like
true.
doing removals and having people go, "That guy's crazy."
Right.
Well, now it'll be on TV. So we are a little crazy, and we have a lot of fun doing it. And the cool thing about the show is I've been able to connect with a lot of other beekeepers. I've pulled in friends from beekeeping clubs, and I've gotten to go to some commercial operations and just kind of get these behind the scenes looks. It's sort of like dirty jobs, where I get to go and kind of dig into what other people do. And then you tag along with us doing removals. And yeah, very exciting times to be part of the show. It's just been a real gift. So I got into beekeeping. I just fell into beekeeping. I've done about a million different things in my life, background in journalism and writing and media, and just lived a lot of places overseas. And I was living in Idaho, and I got dragged to a beekeeper presentation. I had no interest. I thought this was stupid. And the guy who spoke about bees was so enthusiastic about his subject and
Mhm.
so engaging that about 10 minutes into it, I just was like peppering him with questions. And you mean there's one queen, and one queen does all the work and lays all the eggs, and how do you make, I said, my first question was, well, how do you make more queens? And he said, slow down, slow down. And so I bought all the stuff and got some bees, and it was a journey. I moved back to Texas in 2014 and got into removals. And I got into removals because I wanted more bees. I just thought freebies.
Right.
I did it for free for a while. Then I hooked into a bee club, and I got a mentor, and he said, you got to charge for this. So, and it is pretty grungy, miserable work. And I needed to get liability insurance and create a business. And so it's become a business, but it's still driven by the passion for bees and growing the apiary and the adventure of it. And that's how the TV show kind of came about.
Absolutely. And I got to say, watching the show, I mean, it was so, as a beekeeper, I'm sure you guys are largely doing it for the greater audience of the general public. As a beekeeper, it was just fascinating, because
Oh, good.
I understood some of the behind the scenes of what was actually happening. And I learned a lot as a beekeeper just watching it. And
Well,
that's,
that's great.
it was educational for me even as a commercial beekeeper. So,
Yeah, I'm excited for the show to come out. I'm a little worried because we beekeepers are opinionated
oh
folks.
yes.
And we get together in a bee club, and you got to do this with your bees, you got to do that with your
Mm.
bees. I feel like I'm really putting myself out there, like
You are,
and
yes.
there's just times I do stuff wrong on camera all the time,
Yeah.
and it happens, and that's the fun part of the show. We just kind of put it out there and get people talking, and I'm excited to get to a larger audience too.
Yeah, it was so relatable. I felt, when you would make a mistake, I would just laugh because I've done it 100 times. And so I was like, yes, I've done that. And that, oh yeah, man, it hurts when you get stung there.
Right.
I mean, it
Or
was, yeah.
the other one is a removal guy. We're opening a wall, and we're like, the bees are going to be right here, and there are no bees. We got a big hole in somebody's wall, and then we're over here.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's like the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But we've gotten to hang around with some other bee removal guys. My friend JJ from up in Austin, and
Absolutely.
some other Tony from Lockhart tagged along with us. He's a character, and so we've had a lot of fun doing that.
That's awesome.
Frozen?
It froze just a little bit there, but we can, there you go. You're good. You're good. I've got to say, before we move off the show, I think you've coined my favorite beekeeping phrase in the show. And you can probably guess which one it was, but it was, the best thing about beekeeping is it satisfies the middle-aged man's desire to putter. That so encompasses and encapsulates beekeeping in general. It was, I'm never going to forget that phrase. It's perfect.
It's true. Now my garage, it's like my, it's a reason to have a very active man cave.
Yes. So true. It's awesome. It's awesome. So I got to ask, what is the most stings you've gotten doing a bee removal?
Oh boy.
You
actually
can estimate.
Numbers. Oh, I can't even guess. So even there was one in the pilot episode where we did a tree trap out, and it was probably one of the worst, the most defensive. I tried not to say defensive, but defensive hives I've ever dealt with. And we both had inadequate equipment on. My friend Al had like a light, like a Korean screen suit, and then I had just a jacket, and they were getting up under my suit and inside my suit. So I've gotten stung up pretty badly and actually one of my first removals was with JJ and Chuck Rayburn, who's no longer with us, a great guy. He came down to New Braunfels, and I had these crummy cloth gloves, and I was so eager to learn and get into it that I'm banging away with a hammer, and I was getting stung. I had like Mickey Mouse hands. Just giant. And they're like, give it a rest, kid. And I was like, no, I really want to do this. So I've gotten some good sting ups. I try to avoid it. But like you probably, Blake, I get in the bee yard, and it's just so much easier to work without gloves.
It is.
I sometimes do it to show off, but I also sometimes do it because just if you're grabbing queens and doing stuff. So even rubber gloves don't do it. So I'm stung up today.
Yeah. I can. Same.
But, because of that. So.
Yeah, and I saw you wearing the nitrile gloves in the show, and we've started wearing those the last couple of years. Just a really thick, like a 7 to 9 mil nitrile glove, and you still get stung through it, but it's so convenient. You get them dirty, you pull them off and throw them away, and they're great. So a lot of new beekeepers. You mentioned a lot of new beekeepers hear the term freebies. Somebody calls, hey, we've got bees in our eave. I'll give them to you for free. All you got to do is come out and get them. And they think, wow, a free beehive. Any advice for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's a don't fall for it. I once had an old boy try to sell me bees in his garage ball. He said, I think these bees are worth something. I say, I'll give them to you for $100. I said, sir, it doesn't work that way. You give me money and I take the bees.
Right.
No, I mean, the only situation where I call it really free bees is a swarm. Swarms are free bees. I don't charge for swarms. If they're too far away, I just won't get them. I'll just tell people, hey, just wait. The swarm will go away. Swarms are just bees on the move, and you just capture them. So that to me is free bees. But established bees and that don't want to leave, they're not free. The other thing is feral bees. You're dealing with a unknown genetic, and so you get a whole variety of behavior. And so for years I raised more or less feral colonies, and there were a lot of challenges with it. There's a kind of a lot of hotbed of debate among some beekeepers about things like small cell bees and survivor bees and survivor stock. And by and large, I end up requeening. So that in the least, that free colony that I took out of the water meter or the wall or the eave, I've got to buy woodware. I've got to buy,
Right.
I've got to buy a queen, and I've got to spend time and feed and so. Yes, free bees, but not really free bees. The only free bees are swarms.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So do you, when you get that hive, you get it into a box, do you requeen it right away? Do you wait and see if it has a queen and see how she performs? What does your timeline look like?
Second, the latter. So I'll let the bees establish. I used to be really meticulous about hiving them up and spending time and observing them. And I do so many removals that I end up just like dumping them, dumping them, feeding them, leaving them. And then I just come back and see what's going on. And if less than 2 weeks, so that you won't get a laying worker in the worst scenario. So, bees without a queen for too long one of the workers will start laying eggs, and that's a doomed situation. Where, sometimes they just abscond right away. That's not unusual. Some removal guys and folks who catch swarms will use things like queen excluder to lock the bees in. I tend not to. My process is I try to hide them up in the evening, and I feel like I dump them in front of the hive and let them go into the hive. If I haven't found the queen, I use a container vac, and if I haven't found the queen, it's my opportunity to found the queen and put her in a clip. It's my opportunity to say, oh, there she is, right? And that's kind of fun. And then watch their behavior. If they rush right in, that's usually a good sign. I give them time, and if they get established, I kind of watch their behavior. I let them build up, and then I'll requeen, or more often than not, I will requeen, because I've been doing more ag exemption work. So I'll take the bees that I've captured, requeen, and I'm not going to put a feral colony on somebody's property. There's too much liability there.
Yeah. So you get the bees out of the wall, you bring them, you dump them in front of a hive, you give them food. You come back a few weeks later, see if, I assume you've got a box with comb or foundation that they can run into.
Big plus. If you've got drawn out comb, this time of year, if you're second year beekeeper and you've got supers with drawn out combs, throw some in the freezer and save it. And then when you do a removal, they just take to that comb very, very quickly. I do cut comb out of the wall or wherever if I get to the comb, and fit that into usually medium frames. And that's a good way for them to start, and they'll attach it. They'll put it all together. So it gives them something. They're scent driven. So something that smells like home. It's a traumatic thing for bees, right? They get run through a big vacuum, and driven around Comal County for, a hour or two. They have a way, they have a pause when you get them to the yard until they kind of figure out, oh, we're bees. We survived this thing.
So what percentage would you say stay and turn into a successful hive with that method?
I've been talking to other removal guys that seem to have higher percentages than me. So I'm kind of thinking about modifying. I'd say 80%.
Wow, that seems really good.
I feel that's pretty good.
That's great. Yeah.
There's times that I'll just get bees though. I'll end up not finding the queen just because I'll vacuum up just big, tons of bees, and I see that they're queenless. So then I introduce another removal.
Gotcha.
Like I said, when I started, every hive was totally precious, and I would just kind of, oh, what's gonna go on here? Oh, let's watch it. And now I dump bees, and if they don't build up quickly, I dump another hive, and I don't even do the paper marriage. Which is you introduce them with boxes. Ain't nobody got time for that. I will dump them on there and say, y'all figure it out, make friends, and
move on. Well, that is so key, because back when I used to do removals a million years ago, that was always the hardest thing for me, was to get them to stay and get them to take. And so I love the process you've just outlined. And I think that's so key to get them to stay. So
I think food is key. I think food is really key. Food, give them food. I'll make sure their entrance is small, so that because they don't have the ability to defend right out the gate, they can robbed out pretty quickly, or
Right.
because here's this new hive coming into the apiary with all kinds of resources and all these confused bees. So they don't
Yeah.
start guarding their colony right away. It seems like
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah.
food, reduced entry. I actually will use the queen excluder on swarms now and again, because
Okay.
swarms to me are so precious. You get them, you go and you spend time and you
Right.
shake. I love shaking them on a sheet and finding the queen and doing all that. And then you get them back to the apiary and you feed them and you set them up and you come back the next day and they're gone. And you're
I
like,
know. Such a waste.
so, so I'll throw a queen excluder on the
Yeah.
bottom. I also have an entrance reducer that has excluder on it, and I'll
Okay.
just put that on there for a couple of days. Once she lays an egg, once that queen lays an egg, they're yours. She's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I sometimes do that. But
One thing I used to do with swarms was I'd take a frame of brood from a strong hive and put it in there in the box too. And I noticed that would up my rate of success in
yeah,
getting those bees to stay. Is if there was some brood in there to start with, it seemed
uh-huh.
like they were much more apt to stay too.
You
And
mean
so,
you don't do removals anymore, Blake?
no, I'm so thankful to not do it. You know, I still take joy when someone calls and says, "Hey, I got bees in my house," and I go, "Here's a phone number. Call this guy." It's a
Well,
great
I wish
feeling.
I were in your area. I'd love to be on your list.
I wish you were too. So,
Well, I
okay,
have.
so
Oh, good.
no, you're good. You're good.
I have a local bee supply company, and they are wonderful about sending people
That's
my way.
awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome. Well, if you
they'll
ever,
even pave the way by saying it actually costs. They'll
yeah,
say,
yeah,
they'll kind of.
absolutely. Well,
So
when you open up a branch in DFW or the Houston area, we'll push them
perfect,
your way. So,
perfect.
so walk us through, for those that have never done a bee removal, in just a couple of minutes, kind of walk us through your process, because all beekeepers get the inevitable phone call
Sure.
from someone that figures out they're a beekeeper and says, "Hey, I got bees in my house. What next?" So what's your process if they want to do a bee removal? You get that call in a couple minutes. Just kind of walk us through the process of what from the time you get that phone call, what happens to the time you
Yeah.
get those bees out of the wall.
Well, it starts with the phone call. Honestly, I spend a lot of time on the phone with folks who call. There's a lot of misconceptions about bees, and your average homeowner, they usually like to tell me everything they know about bees. So I just sort of,
Yeah.
okay,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
my cousin had bees, okay, and then they tell me what the scenario they think they have, and
Hmm.
I had a lady once tell me that the bees had dragged a rabbit up into a tree and they were chawing on it, and that's what she thought a
Oh
swarm was
my
doing.
goodness.
They were chawing on a rabbit. So there's
I hope
a
that's in the show, by the way.
I think you made it. But
Uh,
just anecdotally, but my wife loves to listen to my conversations with bee clients, because I'm always sort of talking them down off the cliff, and I
right.
try not to come from a high place of like you don't
Hmm.
know anything,
Right.
and just speak in plain English of what they're facing. I want to diagnose and make sure they're bees. I've gone on
Mm-hmm.
wild goose chases enough for yellow jackets, or is there a papery substance anywhere? Do you see something that looks like paper mache?
Mm.
Mexican honey wasps or
Right.
hornets, or is there so yellow jackets to the uninitiated can look like honeybees, and actually by description they'll go into a cavity. So sometimes that's a challenge. I want to make sure they're bees. I'll ask the
Sure.
folks to send me a picture or video, and then I diagnose. I'll give them kind of what to expect price-wise, and
Hmm.
we'll have a conversation like that, and then I'll schedule it, and then
Okay.
it's diagnosing. I come out, and I've got some really useful tools. I've got a FLIR thermal camera.
Awesome.
Heat. Those are great.
And does that attach to your smartphone, or is it
No,
a
I have a
camera?
standalone gun, and
Okay.
in fact, FLIR is a sponsor of our show and came in and gave us this
Wow.
honking thing that just like sees through everything.
Amazing.
So we've been working with this super camera, like HD camera that records and everything.
Mm.
The FLIR works great. The thermal camera works great, but not in every scenario, right? It doesn't
Mm.
see through concrete or doesn't see into a tree. But with things, particularly where if bees are hanging on, so it senses surface temperature. So if bees are
Mm.
hanging onto a shed floor,
Hmm.
the heat is going to be on that shed floor. I did a shed
Right.
yesterday, and I just walked in, and it's sort of magic. You just, oh look, there's your bees, and I literally draw it with a pencil, and then that's where I make my cuts to get in and get the bees.
Great
So
idea.
really walls, I'll try to check both sides. So like in a structure, I want to see outside and inside if possible. You
Mm-hmm.
know, a thermal camera sees through drywall very well, whereas it might not see through hardy board or that kind of thing.
Mm.
I also have a scope camera, and it's kind of a low-tech scope camera. It's a camera on a probe with
Mm.
lights, and I
Mm.
just can poke into, I'll drill a hole or find an opening and poke inside and see what's up.
Mm-hmm.
So that problem solving. Then there's kind of the communication with the client about what we're going to do. We're going to cut, right?
Mm.
So
Right.
demolition. And so with some exceptions, by and large, I'm cutting into your wall or
Mm.
cutting limbs off a tree or lifting something up. And so we'll have a conversation. The bees are less of a challenge than the access to the bees. That's
Totally
really
makes sense.
it's
Yeah.
so then it's about safety. Once we
Mm.
make a plan with the customer, it's like, okay, who's nearby,
Mm.
children and small animals and pets.
Sure.
And is this a high traffic area? Is this I did a removal in San Antonio right next to a very busy bus stop. And
Ooh.
I only
Mm.
found that out like about an hour into the job.
Oh. Oh
The
no.
So we went out and had to tape off this whole area of the street. So
Right.
I caution tape. I mean, quite often the best thing to do is to get in and get the bees quickly and get out. So,
Mm.
so I don't
Right.
necessarily like to wave flags and run around. Here we go.
Exactly.
But especially if you're the camera crew, we are
You
kind of
draw a
waving
crowd.
flags. Look at us.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, safety, make a plan. And then, and there's a variety of ways to get bees out. There's classic cutout, which I
Mm.
prefer being able to get in, and I call it the factory. Get the
Mm.
factory out, cut all the, get to the queen and get to
Right.
all material. And then there's cases where you can't. So things like you trap them out,
Mm.
um,
Mm.
and forced abscond. I prefer to be able to get to the bees wherever possible, but
Absolutely.
there's kind of a wrench for every nut.
Yeah. And then do you repair the house when you're done, or do you say no, we're not going to touch that, get a contractor?
It depends on the scenario. So I'm an
Okay.
old carpenter, but I'm no great finish carpenter. So things like eaves and siding,
Mm-hmm.
usually the conversation is I will remove very carefully, do very fine cuts, but I don't replace.
Gotcha.
But then there are times where it's a tear down, so I get to just
Mm.
take a sawzall and
Awesome.
which is great.
Yeah.
With things like sheds and floors, and then I've done some soffit where they said, hey, if you just tack up plywood when you're done, that's
Mm.
perfectly fine.
Gotcha.
So it's a conversation. But if it's a really nice home or a nice structure,
Mm-hmm.
usually it's up to the client to button that up.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And I assume you get liability insurance, and
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's not something you just run out and do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's so complex. I mean, it makes sense why you charge and why there's no such thing as freebies, and why the brand new hobby. And I did this literally before I got a beehive. I went out and did a bee removal. I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't even have bee gloves yet, and I thought I could go cut bees out of somebody's shed. I mean, it was a disaster. I mean, I got stung 100 times. The homeowner got stung. I'm lucky I didn't burn the building down. So hopefully, if you're a new beekeeper listening to this, go with an experienced beekeeper who's done it 100 times before you ever try it on your own, because it's not easy.
I went and worked as free labor for some local guys. One guy, Russell, out of San Marcos, and Chuck Freeburn, and JJ was new as well. So he's a pro beekeeper now.
Yeah.
Two of us were kind of new to it, and then I got a mentor. His name's Al Friedel, and Al lives just nearby, and so we met at a club, and we've been dating ever since. We spent a lot of time together. My wife said, your girlfriend's on the phone. So no,
that's especially funny if you see the show and you see Al. It's it seems like a character.
He's great. He's a wonderful guy,
Yeah.
and he's my go-to for problem solving. He's also very mechanical. And then we have our buddy George, and oddly, the pilot episode really focuses on the three of us, and
Mhm.
because of COVID, we haven't been able to work together as
Oh, what a
much.
shame. What a
It's been
shame.
a real shame. So
Yeah.
I've been able to partner with other folks and kind of hit or miss with the boys. But now my friend George is a mechanic. He
Mhm.
actually works on car washes. So it's good
Nice.
to have more eyes on a problem. So it is nice to go with other people and to make that plan together. And
Absolutely.
we argue. Yeah.
That's part of the fun. Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
that's great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've gone so far beyond just bee removals too. I mean, you do you sell honey, you do ag leases, you sell bees. K- What are some of the ways you've generated income outside of removals? And I'm especially interested. I know you mentioned you do the ag lease.
Yeah.
Um, how does
That's
that
been
work? And how,
the
how'd
ag
you get
lease
into
thing.
that?
Yeah, the ag lease thing has been great. Um, it's funny. I was talking to a client, ag client, about
Yeah.
my business, and he said, "So, let me get this right. So, people pay you to take bees, and then you take the bees, and then you make the bees make honey, and you take their honey after you've leased the bees to other people."
Well, when you put it that way.
He's like, "You're ripping everybody off, and you're making a TV show about it." Like, that's kind of how.
Mm,
So yeah. So the as a sideliner, and I have a day thing. I do marketing work and consulting work, and that keeps me
mhm.
busy. But honestly, during COVID, uh, things have kind of changed. My marketing
Right.
business has gotten very slow, and beekeeping has ramped up.
Mm.
So beekeeping is kind of been paying the bills these recent months,
Wow.
which is it's
Wow.
very interesting. So
No kidding.
the ag exemption thing. So folks who need to prove an agricultural purpose on their 10 acres of land, they go to their county assessor and
Mhm.
discuss it and come up with a plan, and then usually it goes county by county in Texas, right? So every county is different. I don't get into the nuts and bolts and legal where details. That's up to
Sure.
the client to set up with their county assessor. But
Right.
when the county assessor says you need 16 hives in the next 5 years, by
Mhm.
5 years, that's when we come up with a plan. And so I just lease hives on a per month, per hive basis, and then we'll make a plan to grow an apiary. If they don't have agricultural exemption yet,
Mhm.
a 5-year process to prove it.
Right.
So that uh, that costs. So we're not going to, if they need 16 hives or
Mhm.
15 hives, we're not going to
Sure.
start day one with 15. We're going to start with 3 year one,
Right.
6 year two, and it's got to make sense to the homeowner, the rancher, so that they're saving enough on taxes that it makes sense to hire me. It's also
Mhm.
I don't just do ag exemption for anybody.
Mhm.
This is a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
I'm putting resources of my own on their property. If I've gotten some calls, and if I don't get a good feeling about it,
Mm.
I'm full up. I'm too busy,
Right.
honestly.
Right.
Um, but it's actually kind of fun because I have all these I call them my bee leases. I go out to my bee leases
Right.
and take care of bees on other folks' property, and we inevitably it's a relationship.
Right.
They observe things going on, or they get interested quite often in the bees. And I've also gotten into doing some workshops and some coaching,
Mm.
so
Fantastic.
one-on-one with new beekeepers, because
Right.
as a new beekeeper, it's like when you get that, you buy the gear and you buy the box and you put the bees in there, and then now what?
Now what?
Why am
Right.
I doing everything wrong? I don't
Exactly.
have a queen. I don't
Exactly.
have a queen. Yes, you do. That's
Help.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Right. Right.
I wished I had more help when I started, kind of somebody to talk me down, and
Yeah.
and that institutional knowledge. Blake, you've been beekeeping for a long time. You that's why when beekeepers meet, what do we say to you? How long you been beekeeping? Because it
Sure.
matters a
Sure.
lot. How many things have you done wrong and learned
Mhm.
from? Is
Right.
basically it.
Right. Yeah.
So
How many mistakes have you made? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I look at you. You're what I want to be when I grow up. My
Oh my
goodness.
goodness. Well, there's a big long list of people I want to be when I grow up. So I totally get it. So So you're such a neat model of diversification, and that's one of the things that I love most about beekeeping is, I mean, you can do bee removals, you can do ag exemption programs, you sell honey as well, you can teach classes, mentoring,
Yeah.
products of the hive. There's dozens of different products you can make from each beehive, and there's some safety in that, in that kind of diversification.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of fun in that, and that's what I love so much is there's limitless areas to explore in
Yeah.
beekeeping. And
Well, this
yeah.
year, this is a perfect example. Bad honey year, by and
Right,
large, everywhere, right? We have
right,
kind of
right.
old timers say worst in decades. Okay, well, I still have plenty of honey. I'm still extracting right now,
Hmm.
but not like I had last year. Well, I'm also selling hives, and I've got these ag leases out, so it doesn't kill my business that we don't have
Yeah,
a huge nectar flow and tons of honey.
exactly. And anytime you're dependent on the weather, you need some diversification, because I
Right.
mean, inevitably, it's the weather's going to go bad, and so I love the model. And honestly, I think if you're not going to be a commercial migratory beekeeper like myself, I think your model is one of the most successful opportunities for making a decent income in beekeeping. Is you do a little bit of everything,
Yeah.
and you keep it to yourself and your family, and maybe some part-time help.
Yeah.
And as it grows, you might hire full time, but there's money to be made in that diversified model on a local level. I mean, there really is. And
Keep it
sometimes my
small.
wife goes, "Why are we commercial beekeepers with all this stuff going on?" I'm like, "Yeah, I could probably make more money just keeping it down to one person." But
A friend of mine says, keep it small and keep it all.
yeah, yeah, so true. There's a
And
lot of
and
truth there.
I don't know why beekeepers like to say you're not going to make $1 million beekeeping. Um, why not?
Yeah, right. The
you know,
demand, yeah, it's
like
there.
it's just a business, and you think about. I don't honestly, I don't think about the business of beekeeping as much as I just think about the things like the success of the hives,
Right.
and the real driver for all this is I love the bees.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
it's like the payoff for me, unless it's 105 like now, but
Yeah.
there are, and bee removal is no picnic, but
No.
I
No.
also there's something that draws me to that there's an
Right.
event there, and
Right.
I love to tell stories around bees and bee
Hmm.
removal, and so it's sort of the passion for bees that's driven it
Right.
for me, and
Absolutely.
the business limps along. So
And that passion's got to be there too, ultimately, because it is hard, and if you don't love bees, then getting stung 100 times a day in the 100-degree weather, it's just not going to work for you. And
or
so,
losing a hive, there's like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
really bees will break your heart. You
they
just
will. Yeah.
what? They're gone. They left.
I know. It's heartbreaking. It really is. So,
Really is. And then they'll surprise you.
right.
Same scenario. Come out, and
Yeah.
I had some oddly my hill country hives, my hives that are in caliche dirt and
Hmm.
rock, produced huge this year compared
Yeah.
to last year, and compared to my hives that are in black dirt. So who knew? So
And
yeah,
you can even sometimes have one hive right next to the other, same genetics, same startup, and it's like one's got 100 pounds of honey and the other's got nothing. So
right,
it never ceases to amaze. I feel like the longer I'm in beekeeping and the more I learn, the less I know. It's just
right.
it's amazing, which makes it fun. It's new every day, and that keeps it exciting. So,
Sure.
well,
Yeah.
your time is valuable, but I've got a few more questions for you.
Talk away, man.
What's something that you feel like is really important for all the people out there watching this that are small scale or sideline, looking to diversify, maybe wanting to make money in beekeeping?
Mm.
What's a couple of things that you just really feel like they ought to know?
I mean, I would say stick to the basics,
Mm,
and
great advice.
you know the the three things you can control in a beehive. It's nutrition, it's the quality of the queen, and it's varroamite, right? So
Yeah.
you got to be doing something for all. You might not be actively doing something, but you better be thinking about all three of them. How old is this queen, right?
Hmm.
Make a record, right? How's she pretty? What's the pattern look like? When's the time to requeen? I spent a lot of time with my feral colonies when I started, just letting them requeen themselves, which is a strategy. You know what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
Uh, it just got painful, and then I started to really I learned about queens and started to handle queens and say, okay, let's pinch a queen. And so, you know, thinking about the genetics of the hive and seeing how they produce, using good practices, protocols for Varroa, right? Figuring out nothing works perfectly, but you know, testing for mites and that kind of thing. And then feed them. You know, don't do what I did and get too many hives right off. I have too many hives right now. I'm overwhelmed at certain times a year. That's part of the deal, I guess. But I would have done better as a new beekeeper to start small, stick to my basics, and then I can apply those things that work to a bigger apiary if that's what I want, or whatever I want to do with bees.
Right. That is such, I mean, whether you have 2 hives in your backyard or a 10,000 hive operation, you just encapsulated, I think, the most important piece of management that you can possibly do in a hive. Because I tell people all the time, if you want to be a successful beekeeper, do what you just said, learn to control mites, however you're going to do it, learn to control it and feed properly, watch the nutrition, and then manage queens. And if you can do those things, you're probably going to be a successful beekeeper.
Yeah.
And that is fantastic advice. Love it.
Yeah.
So, what is one thing you wish that the general public knew about bees and beekeeping? That you interact with the general public a lot. So
Yeah.
what's one thing you wish they all understood about bees or beekeeping?
Murder hornets are nothing. They're just nothing. There's just not a thing.
I love it. Yeah. Stop sending me links about the murder hornet.
I have a flow hive, right?
Yeah.
But the flow hive is not the answer to all our problems. I love my flow hive. It's very cool. But so many, you know, the one thing I'm excited about with the general public is there seems to be this general enthusiasm about pollinators. There seems to be this general concern about bees' health and pollinators' health. So it's not always well informed, but I think it's good that people say. And when I tell people I'm a beekeeper, it's, oh, that's wonderful, you're saving the world. Yes, I'm saving the world. I'm saving. You're welcome.
Totally.
But I mean, I think when you think about pollinators, and it has to, in my mind, it has less to do with pesticides or it has to do with habitat. So if you're concerned about bees, we should think about habitat. And those are, it's not a simple challenge. It's you know, environmental challenges are large and complex, and they're not, and species diversity to me, I think, is so important. And we lose that in plants alone. You talk to any old timer before Texas wildflower tanked, years ago, it's like a different state. And so many of those invasives are here. You know, the greatest argument I heard about invasives and diversity is, do you want to live in a suburb with a Lowe's and a Home Depot and a McDonald's that looks exactly the same in North Carolina as it does in New Jersey, as it does it's kind of the case sometimes. That's what's happening in our natural world. So it's sometimes I think the discussion about bees is too simple. Bees good, man bad. Maybe true, but that we're dealing with these very complex systems and habitat. And so folks always ask me, well, like, what can I do to save the bees or something? And it's like, I don't know, stop driving. I drive myself around. I don't know. They're complicated questions, and there aren't simple answers to them. But I'm excited that people it feels like there's more awareness, or maybe it's the audiences that I talk to, there's more interest and awareness in protecting our environment and protecting pollinator habitat. I think that's
yeah, and I think you're right, and I see that every day. You know, there's certainly, you know, you look at 15 years ago when hobby beekeeping was virtually, you know, nothing. I mean, no one kept bees as a hobby anymore. And then you had a colony collapse disorder in 2006. It really started hitting, and the bees are disappearing, bees are dying, and the news media just ran with that.
Right.
And 15 years later, everybody knows about bees. Everybody knows about the problem they're having. Everybody's concerned. And so now what to do about it, you're right, that's a whole nother ball game. But awareness is a first step. And that's really neat to see.
And the other question is like, well, is colony collapse over? Well, yes. But do bees still face challenges? Well, yes.
Yeah.
What are the answers to bees' challenges? Myriad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If it were one thing we could pinpoint, we probably could have fixed it by now.
Right. So it's not Roundup.
Exactly. I mean, yeah. Or cell phones. Yeah.
Or cell phones, or 5G.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Contrails. It's not happening.
Exactly. Yeah. So, okay. Well, before we wrap up, can you tell us, you must have countless hilarious, terrifying, wonderful bee stories. Can you impart on us one or two, maybe an oops removal, a terrifying moment, a hilarious moment?
I mean,
can you share a story with us?
So many.
I'm sure we could take another hour.
The interaction with the client is always funny. My stupidity is funny. I showed up once with a swarm. It was just a swarm that was just about to establish, and so they were well behaved, and it was this guy. He was a game warden and kind of big deal, and I wanted to impress him. And I went in, and I didn't even have my suit on. I was like, that's just a swarm. And it was in a chest, and I opened it up, and I said, that's the queen right there. And I told her, I was like, are you an idiot? He said, did you just squish it? I said, yeah, I was just trying to show you.
Oh, that's hysterical.
I've taken them out of a bilge of a boat that they didn't want me to do anything to disturb the boat. So I took this hatch off and just stuck my hand into, and I mean, it was just full of honey and comb, and I was under there for hours just scraping, and I was covered in honey. We did one recently where my friend Tony, and it'll be in this first season of the show, where it was a giant fiberglass chicken with bees coming out the beak, and we couldn't damage the chicken in any way. So
is that on a major highway?
It is.
I've seen that.
Yeah. Lockhart, Luling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we had to deal with the nose of the chicken and the trap out. And my friend Tony is hilarious, and we just had a lot of fun with it. A lot of bad chicken puns, and so we just have fun doing it. I do a lot of removals alone, and that's fine. There's a lot of kind of nuts and bolts removals, but it's the kooky, crazy ones where I call a friend and say, dude, you gotta run the smoker while I capture the bees with those are the fun ones, and we have.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, if you want to see more, go watch this show, because I'm sure there's countless on there. So
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I wish we could go all day long. One of these days we need to film like a video, an 8-hour one, and we can just chop it up in segments. And I guess that's what you're doing with the TV show. So
that's right. Yeah.
So where can people see the show currently? Where can they see the pilot? Where can they see it once it comes out? Where can they tell us about your website? Where can people find more?
So yeah, you can get all the info at charliebee.com, and it's CHRLIEBEE.com. And there's a link to the Amazon. You can also just search Amazon Prime. So that's just the pilot episode. We're still in production and editing for season 1. We're going to have kind of a soft launch party in New Braunfels in October. Hopefully we can get enough people in a room 6 feet apart or something like that do at our local theater. And then it'll be on PBS. Hopefully, the way PBS works, it'll start in Austin, and we hope it kind of goes viral to other PBS affiliates. And we think it has a real good shot. The reception has been really good, and it's just fun to tell these stories.
Yeah, they're awesome. And we'll link to the website. We'll link to the show so everybody can just click the links and watch all that. And then, hey, if you've got details on a launch party or something, we'd be happy to put that out too.
Oh, that's awesome.
I know people are going to be entertained. So I'm going to have to find some way, even though I'm in DFW, to watch it when it comes out, just because it's hilarious.
We want to get to Dallas, and I think we'll get there. So
Good. Well, I
we're
can't wait.
streaming as well, so
Right.
keep fingers crossed.
Right. Well, we'll publish all that too as it comes along, and as soon as it's available for streaming, we'll get the word out there.
Oh, and I'm on TikTok, man.
I saw it.
TikTok. I have like 3 people follow me on TikTok.
Nice. We'll see if we can get that number up.
But I post a lot of videos and stuff. I love to removals are just lend to that. So I'll set up a GoPro and film myself doing removals. Love sharing that.
Awesome. And it's educational. If you want to get into bee removals, man, it's so educational. So
don't do it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Charlie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a blast, and hopefully we can do it again sometime soon.
Sounds good, man.
Have a great day, Charlie.
You too. Take care.